Let's move on to our final session before afternoon tea. And this is all about people, tools and process to enable collaboration within organisations. And two speakers in this session, Kat Matson, who's the Chief Digital Officer for Brisbane and is charged with the digital transformation of the city as a means of accelerating economic growth and equipping small to medium enterprises with the digital skills to accelerate their business. And joining Kat is Rob Hudson. He's the Managing Director of Clemenger in Brisbane. And he's passionate about creative industries and about digital strategy that spans about 24 years. And his career has seen Rob work with many Fortune 500 companies, leading Australian brands and also the government. So we're absolutely delighted that they're together in this quite exciting presentation. Will you please welcome both? Thank you.
While Rob takes a seat, Anthony's spot on. I'm the Chief Digital Officer for the city, massive title. Really what it gets to mean is that I get to have really cool, juicy conversations about using tools, whether they be digital or otherwise, to make sure that we remain competitive as a city, but also from a country perspective, so long as ensuring that we continue to stay in this increasingly globally connected economy. And so one of the things that I'm enjoying about the conversations that I've seen so far today is that's exactly what you guys are talking about. And Vibor, you couldn't have set me up more beautifully in terms of how do we actually collaborate within our ecosystems, recognising that our ecosystems are often bigger than our immediate industries, to actually create results bigger than what we can do on our own. Now, I was briefed to help have some conversations today around how do we use collaboration to drive innovation. As I said to one of my colleagues earlier this week, innovation is one of those other drinking games up there with big data, startups, entrepreneurs. There's a few. Innovation is one of those words that tends to mean too many things to everybody. And really, at the end of the day, what does it mean? It means that we just keep improving. It can be small improvements, can be massive improvements. But one of the things that I'm convinced, because I do a lot of work in the startup ecosystem as well as in the innovation ecosystem, one of the things that I'm convinced of as we move in a rapidly changing economy where we don't have necessarily full-time permanent roles. I was talking with some younger people this week, fully qualified. They cannot get permanent placements, not because they're underqualified, but because the workforce is changing so much that they just keep being put on contracts. So we're seeing more and more portfolio roles, more and more organisations, large and small, just doing project work in and out. And I'm convinced that the number one capability that will ensure survival for every single one of us is the ability to collaborate. The problem is we weren't taught to collaborate, we were taught to compete. And we were taught that not only can we pretend to play nice, but in order for me to win, you've got to lose. So this collaboration conversation that I'm about to have with my old friend,
go with both. Yeah, that's fine.
Around collaboration is to give you some of the really practical tools, literally the tools, the processes, and how we collectively have collaborated in various industries, sectors, and in the extraordinarily competitive industry of advertising.
Yes.
So now that I've ranted a little bit, what's your story, Rob?
Oh, God. She always does this to me. You're a nightmare on stage.
You know what I mean.
I've been digital for 25 years, so this new thing of digital is quite hilarious to me. I've been doing it for 25 years and enjoying all 25 years of them, the new stuff. And I guess, our job is obviously the communications industry, and our job is to tell a story, tell a narrative to the right people at the right time. I think the reason why this is a pertinent conversation for us right now is that actually that narrative gets lost within the organisations. So actually we find ourselves reinventing organisations' narratives because they lose their touch with their own, which is a problem, right? And it's a problem going forward. So I think a lot of what we're doing now in terms of technology has infiltrated our industry massively, and you've touched on it, we'll touch on it more in this conversation. Understanding where the data sits, how humanity and people sit within that conversation around data.
What do you mean, people?
Yeah, sorry, it's still an important part of the process, right? Still in there. So understand how people and data relate, and then help organisations protect themselves from that change in staff and knowledge, not just knowledge exiting, but also knowledge dissemination into the wrong parts of the organisation, and we can talk about that. But also how you share that knowledge out with the general public and how you actually connect to customers and general public and take that forward into web platforms or social media, and how does that all smushy mess become a useful way of communicating?
So let's start with that smushy mess. How do we move from a smushy mess of collaboration, which is often how it's seen, because it's, you know, we imagine that it started as a drinking game or crazy ideas around a table and then we try to actually do something. Why do we need to put structure, tools, frameworks around potent
around the whole
collaborative
thing?
efforts?
I think the collaboration for me always comes down to a couple of things. So often it's about the collaboration that's necessitated by the organisation structure. So you can all look at your own organisations and understand how many meetings you have to have, how many phone calls, how many emails, the late at night phone calls, the late at night emails that happen within an organisation because of necessity. Then no one wants to be on a phone at 10 o'clock at night or sending emails, but they just happen. Why? Look at that. That's always a good starting point in understanding how the process works within an organisation. But then also, once you have that process understood, understand the benefit to the individual. I think what happens with collaboration is often we look at the organisation's benefit. We can often look at the consumer or the client or the customer benefit. But actually, if you don't sell it internally, if there's no benefit for the individuals that are having to do that collaboration, then it doesn't work. And we've all, portals, websites, intranets. We all went through the era of intranet.
Who still has an intranet? Who uses their intranet? Yeah. Okay, nice.
This is
Nice.
Someone, good.
Someone.
But intranets was the birth and death of software internal to organisation, right? I mean, we all spun them up, put them in, and then watched no one use them.
Yeah. I got an email notification yesterday about our Yammer network, and there was a one-person conversation going on Yammer. We'll come back to that.
Yeah, the lone wolf.
Is there a neat process to collaboration? Is there a beginning, a middle, and an end that can be facilitated with tools?
Yeah, I think, and tools are really interesting because I think what you have to do is let the technology come after the decision-making process. You can't solve strategy with technology. So I think the situation with the organisation is look down and look at what you do and how you do it and why you do it. Look for the low-hanging fruit first. You can spend millions of dollars putting in incredibly complex systems, SharePoint, these big generation engines, and then no one will use them. And what happens is everyone comes disenfranchised. You spend a lot of money. No one knows how to use them. You've got a training exercise. And all the time you're doing all those bits, you're hoping someone's going to get on the other end and use them. Where in reality, I mean, Yammer, ironically, was the trend of 2 years ago, wasn't it? Everyone was putting in Yammer so you can all chat to each other. Understanding what you actually need as an organisation and how it's going to impact, I think is critical. I also think understanding that just because that's this side of the communication sort of system, the internal communication, how can you let it breach to the outside? So the classic one with websites now where we see constantly, and Yammer has a plugin for that does exactly the same thing, which is when people arrive at the website, they effectively get if there's someone available, someone's online, it will pop up saying, hey, can we do instant chat with you? Well, you can buy that as a standalone piece of software, and of course you can deploy that, but it works better if that's already a work process internally so that it doesn't sit there and then no one's there to answer it, or it doesn't appear if there's no one there to answer it is even better. But understanding that you can actually breach that line in the sand and actually kind of say, well, let's do stuff useful on both sides of the fence, suddenly makes an organisation usually a little bit more willing to invest the time and money.
In the collaborations or in the successful collaborations that you've seen, who owns the process? Who owns the project?
Well, the ones that fail, it's IT. Is there any IT in the room? No, good, we can bag them off. So invariably IT will go, we have the perfect system, and what they'll deploy is usually the most expensive, ridiculously complicated and high-tech system they can get their hands on, and you all have to be computer geniuses to use it. And that misses the point of actually the end market. The internal customer usually is like, well, actually, who's going to be touching this thing and using it? So I think that they're certainly the wrong people. I would always say management has to have massive buy-in because at some point they're going to be paying for this thing and want to champion it. And to a certain extent, a lot of people come on the journey. Some people have to be told to come on the journey. And that's a big part of the process. And there's an inherent value in this. We talked about a large consulting firm that I won't name, but we'll call them DWE. It's close enough. It's on camera. It's fine. It's fine. They'll never know. And part of their problem, and I worked with them, 5, 6 years ago. And their problem was that they knew they had knowledge in the organisation, but they knew it was in the wrong place. The CEO of HP said it recently, if HP knew what HP knew, it would be 3 times more profitable. And it's the truth. I mean, we always assume that the knowledge is leaving the building. As you say, people turn over faster and faster these days. We don't get skill sets in the building long enough. But the reality of it is it also moves. You know, you promote people. You get someone in who's brilliant at this thing that they do, and then you promote them because they're brilliant at the next thing, and then you promote them until they do a job they can't do very well, and then you stop promoting them. Welcome to promotion logic. But in that process, you've probably moved them around, you put them in different parts of the business. And that particular consulting firm found that actually they kind of knew they'd employed a lot of people that could do a certain skill. But when they went out to do a tender or a document, they couldn't find these people. They had moved, the loss adjusters are now over in the lawyers are over in, finance, and it was all in the wrong place. So at that time, it was a pretty simple exercise. We launched a piece of software at the time, it was called Aardvark, it's now called Answer Hub. Which allowed a system that organically learnt the organisation's knowledge. And again, that organic, rather than sitting down and planning everything perfectly, because you'll never do it, because we're humans and we move and we do things and we're odd. And what it did was basically ask lots and lots of questions as people needed to find the knowledge, sent that out to, in the first instance, to the masses. As the answers come back, you score them. Effectively go, is that a useful answer? What happens is the system over time learns the type of question and who to ask it of. So eventually you stop getting asked questions. If you're the person that never gets asked a question, you know all your answers have been terrible. But what it also did was gave them a... Yeah, don't
that worked.
Yeah,
finally,
stop
asking me.
Don't do it. What was interesting about it was while it was doing that knowledge sharing and knowledge dissemination, people could ask lots of questions, and it may be the guy in accounting now that can answer that loss adjusting question. It also showed them how much they're moving people on a logical career path for people coming in. So they could see that, I'm not sure this is right, but they could see that like as a loss adjuster came in, they made a good next step into law and a next good step into financial services. So they actually used it to promote people and put logical career paths in front of people. So that, I love that because no one sat down and ever planned that. They let the data tell the story of their organisation and then put it into practice. And as far as I know, that's still in there, still running to this day, and they're using it to kind of understand. And it helps them do their tenders and all the other things as well. They can bring together these little immediate groups of people, pull skill sets into a micro team, get the job done and send them back to their corners.
So that's a really beautiful example of big data actually being useful data.
Absolutely. I mean, big data, it's funny when you hear about big data, we've all lived the big data trend, right?
Yeah,
and now we're into small data, and that's just the other end of it. I think the reality for data is you've got to work out whether or not you're looking at, and we talk about platform or pipe. So are you looking for something that's collecting a lot of data that you're going to do something with, or are you got a system that data is going to flow past at high speed and you need to do something with it as it happens? Sorry, got the sound away. And I think if you understand those two differences, you can understand what data you actually need. A lot of organisations are pooling an awful lot of data. They have no idea what to do with it. And it's just costing them storage. And equally, a lot of people are letting really good data go by. I think when it comes to the platforms, one of the things that is interesting is that you can start to understand your customer set. And I come from a marketing background, so for me, I want to use any bit of data I see to work out how do I communicate to likey-likeys. How do I find more people that bought my product upstream? If I can see that person come through, yes, I've had a conversation, it's worked, they've bought my product. How can I take them as an individual and go and find a hell of a lot more of them? Because I know that worked. And you can do that. Digital management platforms let you do that now, where all your outbound connections and links and emails and everything you send out aren't direct. They go through a platform. On the back of that, then you can use that to kind of go and get more market.
Yeah. One of my favourite features of Facebook at the moment, the remarketing and similar audiences. Too many ideas just crashed in my head. Did you hear it? The people in the room... everyone's playing nice today because they're in close proximity, but the tendency is to go back and compete, right? You're all trying to get the conferences and events from each other. And I loved the presentation before around the meeting platform to actually find out how are you performing compared to the rest of your region. I love that internal competition. I think we should be putting that on a national scale. And let's bring more conferences to Australia while we compete internally. If there were people in the room who wanted to collaborate on some projects, whether it's on a regional basis or, you guys focus on this and we'll focus on this, or we'll feed you the intel we've got on this, how can we compete outside of our organisations? What are some of the really cool tools that you've seen?
Some of the tools to play with. I think it comes down to the maturity of the organisation to a great extent. There are simple things like Trello. I'm going to throw some software names at you, and I apologise now. You can look them up later. Trello is a really simple platform for collaboration. It enables you to invite people in and then throw them back out again, which is useful if you're going to, Which
I'm still hurting
Not that I'm saying
over
for
that.
a moment.
I'm
Yeah,
still-
sorry. I'll let you in for half an hour. What more do you want? You started creating far too many jobs for everyone. But that's one of the power of a platform like that, where you can invite people in, collaborate for a while, and then isolate that conversation and get on with your work. Answer Hub does the same sort of thing.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm going to cough again. Sorry. I'm warning him now. Things like Stack and Stalk, those things are actually quite interesting platforms in the fact you can...
Stack,
Stack. They've all got stupid names. I don't know why. It's a software market that seems to
Well,
break.
because you've got to get a domain name that hasn't been taken already.
Sorry, I already have got a cough. It's really annoying.
Well, while you're clearing your throat, Trello is one of my favourite all-time tools, and I use it in so many different contexts because it's like a series of electronic post-it notes on electronic corkboards. So you can, I use it for contact management, I use it for project management, I use it for my own to-do list, and so I can start seeing all the linkages as well, because so many of the things that we do, it's kind of, so-and-so needs to be involved in that conversation, and I can just see it all on one big screen on my desktop, but when I'm out and about, I can also add cards on my phone, which is just beautiful.
The mobile thing's really interesting, actually. I think every platform we now look at goes, if it's not mobile friendly, then walk away, because it's the way we operate, right? And especially if you expect people to work longer hours and do more things and on remote locations. Laptops doing stuff on, it's just not the way of the world anymore. Trello on a mobile's better than Trello on a desktop. And I think that starts to become the reality for a lot of these software now, that we actually kind of go, well, actually, how's it going to work? Yeah. But there's a lot of those around, that you can kind of get involved with. I think the other thing to understand is that you probably want at some point to be able to get the data in or out of that damn thing. Mm-hmm. So once you start using a tool, don't assume for a moment you're going to use it forever. So trying to work very quickly on which platforms let me export my data, whether that be to some nasty Excel spreadsheet or whether to something more useful. You need to have that ownership over it. Understanding where the data sits. If it's going to be cloud services, well, who's got that cloud service? How do I back that up? If it's going to be critical to your business, at some point you're going to want to back it up. So make sure you've got that service within the platforms.
Been there, done that.
We all have, unfortunately.
Bureaux actually made a really good comment earlier when he said the CRM is a paradigm, or is a philosophy, not a tool. Can we expand on that from a concept of collaboration? I actually often think that when people are talking about collaborations, they go straight to the tool or the platform first. Yet half the time it's just getting people in a room or using some post-it notes and some flip chart paper.
Yeah, these things still work. The irony of something like Trello, which is a duplication of post-it notes. So if you've got everybody in one location, then software is probably not the best thing to turn to straight away, right? I mean, I have set up organised teams where I watch people sit on the other side of a barrier, instant messaging each other. It's a weird moment in time where you're going to go, what are you all doing? Oh, we're having a chat. It's like, well, you're not. You're just, and it's really slow. I don't know if you've ever, I know I'm not a typist, but to have an online chat is really slow. Stand up and talk to each other, for God's sake. And that's why, and that's integrated in a lot of them, right? A lot of these platforms now have instant message, but they'll also have video, desktop sharing, audio sharing. That we understand that there's a moment in time where maybe just having a quick 5-second phone call is actually probably preferential to some ridiculously online chat. And also the nature of what you're talking about. Sometimes you don't want it recorded. This is the one thing about, when we start to deal with intellectual property and idea generation, sometimes you want to be able to kind of go, actually, this needs to be non-documented, and then we'll put it back in when we know where we're at.
Absolutely. It never ceases to amaze me how long I can text somebody before and then go, I could have done this. Yeah.
The weird ones when you can text someone, they text back, and then you phone them and they don't answer. That's what
but that's because I'm in a meeting and I actually can't talk to you because I'm talking to somebody else.
I'm just saying, Kat, you never answer your phone. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely.
I think one of the other things to look at, what do you want, when you talk about collaboration, what kind of collaboration are you talking about? Because so if you look at something like Dropbox, for instance, which is, I'm assuming a lot of people in the room probably know or even use Dropbox. It's a hard storage system. Dropbox actually in itself is actually a pretty reasonable collaboration tool. You can throw stuff up there and send a link and say, hey, here it is. But they've also then created Dropbox Paper, which is the kind of online, you can do things in front of each other kind of platform. That moves it into the next stage up. You want the storage, you want the repository, but you also want to be able to see the other person doing something in front of your eyes. And this stuff is not expensive. Dropbox Business isn't even expensive. And then you've always got the Googles of the world.
I was going to say Google Docs. I
Google
do that all
Docs,
the time for free.
Have you ever used Google Docs? The terrifying moment where you can watch someone else typing as you're
love
typing. You go, no, that was my sentence. Get off my spreadsheet box. But that, there are certain things where that is just an amazing collaboration tool, and it's virtually free. It depends on which version you use, but and the fact you can then tie it back in. It's a little bit of its own ecosystem. It doesn't play well with others, as Google always says. We always say, could do with better playing well with other people. It doesn't integrate with Outlook and stuff like that. But it's still not a bad little forum. If you want to start doing financial sharing or idea generation, it's very good for text, very good for Excel spreadsheets, or of course not Excel, but spreadsheets. So I think there's a lot of those tools that actually are readily available, and sometimes they're the thing to start with. Test it, see if the market, see if your cohort is ready to do this sort of thing, and then work out what the big ugly version of that might be.
I've got to admit, one of my favourite collaboration tools is just Facebook groups.
Yeah.
You just set up a group, you invite everyone in, and everyone just starts doing their thing. They're already there, and they're seeing the notifications.
That does bring us to one of the other conversations, which is make sure you get your privacy settings right. Because it's really interesting, like Facebook, a lot of this stuff is cloud, and a lot of it is one button away from share to the world.
Yes.
Everyone can see that. And you're in a competitive industry, that's probably not what you want. So usually we would always argue that there would need to be a administration oversight where you invite a lot of people in with control.
No.
So you want free and wild.
Totes. And if we accidentally go, whoops, we just pull it back in.
Which part of government do you work for again?
Yeah.
You're probably the only one with that attitude.
Totes.
Otherwise, let's kill the button, take the button off. There is no way of sharing anything. But I think there's a reality that sits between both of those. You do need to understand that when you start using these things, they actually become the manifestation of your organisation's intellectual property. You can't just have everyone with the ability to go click, share to the world, go, because that's a really bad form.
Yeah, I guess so.
Sorry, unless in your world, of course, share everything.
I will. I'm going to go to the audience for questions shortly. So if you do have a question, start figuring it out. It can be anything to do with how do you enable, empower, power, support good collaborations, So start thinking, put your hands up and we'll get a microphone to you. While that's happening, just making sure. While that's happening, I love hearing stories. Can you give us a nightmare story of a collaboration gone bad? Because there's always lessons in the common stuff.
We really are going to have to be really careful with this one. It's
No
all right. It's all right telling you about the joys, but telling you about the failures.
Yeah.
I'll go a well-known large grocery retailer, and you've only got two to pick from, and it's not the red one. It's not the green one either. Let's be clear. It's covering my arse here. Tin plate in my backside. They had effectively a Yammer system internally, and it was great, and it was in there chatting away. But what no one did was put any layers in the organisation, so everyone could see everybody and could talk to everyone. And of course, then someone decided one day to pop it on the CEO's desk and let him have a look at this lovely conversation that was going on. Not everyone survived that.
The CEO survived?
The CEO was fine. It was a few conversations had, and it was turned off fairly quickly, but the damage was done. I think understanding that, and what that tells you is that every organisation has layers of conversation, and not every layer has to know about every other layer. And I think, now you're not sharing, are you? Now it's suddenly changed. Your opener suddenly closed up. But I think for me, we watched that happen, and thank God we were on the sidelines of that. But understanding that when you do collaboration, there are still parameters. There's still restraints on how you do it. It's free and open, sounds lovely, but actually invariably isn't. So make sure you put in some layers.
Okay. Collaboration's gone well.
I'd have to say the consultancy one was probably the most insightful one. Because not only did it allow collaboration, but it actually allowed for an amazing amount of insight into their organisation, which I don't think anybody expected. And certainly of recent years, we look after, sorry, I'm being really cagey, but in my world, talking about clients specifically is very dodgy.
You're just used to being cagey.
Yeah, I'm used to being cagey. And we look after a motoring company, and part of the insights around that organisation is quite extreme, actually. So some of the stuff, I'll give you the full story, I won't be cagey. If you walk into a car dealership today and go to buy a car, the only person that's interested in selling it to you is the sales guy and the dealer principal. Everyone else is interested in stealing you off of the sales guy. Dealer principal doesn't care, he's going to get the money regardless. But actually, invariably what happens is we don't have enough time to go buy a car, we'll go in, we'll do probably 2 or 3 visits. If you've bought a car recently, you probably realise that as you're going through that process, you start the same conversation again quite regularly. So you'll go see the first guy, he'll show you, maybe test drive, pick a car for you. You'll go in the next day, probably just to buy the damn thing, and you'll go through the whole thing again. And that's mostly because that sales guy wants to take it off of that sales guy, back into that competition reality. So from a collaborative process, well, how do you organise that kind of collaboration? You want them to collaborate because that's the better outcome for the consumer. It's a better outcome for repeat visitation, but it's not really how you're incentivised. So we've taken big data, if you like, in terms of understanding that process. What became clear is car dealers are car dealers. You can't necessarily expect them to put the right name in. They'll put the wrong name in and change it just before the sales go through, so it doesn't correlate with somebody else. So we've started doing things like face recognition. So if you walk into a major dealership now, one particular dealership, it will spot your face. It will put you in the database. As that conversation is happening, it's recording your face. Which means when you walk back in and you'll see it happen, like as you walk in, they go, "Oh, welcome back." That's because the receptionist knows that you have returned, and it will know the parameters of time frame. And she'll try and get you the same sales guy. If he's not available, then the conversation with the next guy isn't allowed to start at the beginning.
Wow.
So that kind of forced collaboration between people that have a necessity for it is really, really powerful. What it's meant is that the sales have gone up dramatically because people will come back and we'll talk about these dealerships in a way that is actually the service is amazing.
It's not lecherous anymore.
It's not lecherous anymore. We're also doing things like understanding, and this is where it gets really interesting, understanding which sales blokes and male and females work better with what type of customer. So if a young girl walks in, for instance, and wants to buy a car, maybe there's a sales guy or girl that works better with that demographic, has a better strike rate. So that will come up on the receptionist screen, and that will be the first person she goes and finds will be that person because they do better with that.
And so have they had to change their commission structure to
Yeah, well,
reflect
it's
that?
fairer now. So basically, if you close the deal, you still get your commission. But if someone's done the upstream work, then it's shared proportionally on the amount of time you've spent with that individual, assuming that they were looking at the type of car that, if I come in and didn't buy a car and bought something completely different, then no. But yeah,
Nice.
you can. So I guess, collaboration with technology, beautiful. What it's also enabled us to do is then do outbound marketing on the back of that says, well, maybe that person came in, gave us a piece of detail. We can see from that they haven't been back in for 3 weeks. We can see they're not there. Maybe we can trigger an email. We can trigger an upstream conversation with them, try and see if they've bought a car somewhere else, do a bit of research, see if there was something wrong. Why didn't they not come in? And then ultimately phone them back to humanity, right? Which is ultimately, if it didn't work, pick up the phone.
That's awesome.
So I think that's a big example of when it works really, really well. And it's also a massive example of big data. But it's understanding that all started around a conversation of the structure and the reality of how that organisation operates against the best outcome for its customers.
Yeah.
And that was the challenge. Like, how do we break that down? And with every interview with the second, they're all going, "Oh yeah, we'll do it this way." And then the sneaky conversation is, "But of course we won't." So we had to find a way that just sort of said, "Well, you're not going to get to choose. We'll find a way of doing it for you."
That's really nice. I like that. Do we have questions before I keep just having a conversation with my old mate? Young mate?
I think we can go with old and fine.
Really? Okay.
Which means we've either done a brilliant job or a terrible one. I don't know.
Yeah, well, we'll find out in the break. I'll listen in. The human element of it, I think, is actually really important because in order to encourage collaboration, we do need to change that paradigm between competition. We need to show that sometimes, what's that word, co-competition or co-op?
Yeah,
the combination of cooperation and competition. Sometimes you can still compete, but play nice together to get an even better outcome. From a sheer leadership perspective, how do we do that? How do we lead that change? How do we lead that paradigm shift?
I think you actually said it, common outcome. A common good, a common delivery, a common process. Take the car dealership one. None of them liked it until someone told them, actually, if you lose a sale, you still get some commission. All of a sudden, everyone likes the idea. So I think you do need to look at what motivates people. Money's one thing, but actually, job satisfaction, closing a deal quicker, things easier, faster. We're pretty simple to understand in most cases. We all want mostly the same things. So understanding that first, everything else is secondary to that because everything else has to work. Value exchange we talk about. If I'm going to do this for you, how does that look? Why does that work? If you don't have that, then you're just building software or you're just putting an idea in front of people that they'll just smile sweetly, let you do it, and then leave the room and do their own thing, right? Like you guys, play nicely together, leave the room, do your own thing. It's the reality of life. That's what we're going to do. But I think if you can find that common good, like what is it that connects us? What's the thread? And if it's about maybe bringing stuff internationally rather than spreading it around nationally, or we can all be, we can all benefit from that thing of bringing work in.
A progressive dinner approach to conventions.
Yeah.
Start the convention up north and bring it down south.
There you go. Well, and again, in that respect, you're then putting a benefit on it for the customer as well, which is the next sort of logical kind of, once you've worked out what's in it for you, how do you market that and sell it, and how does it look salient?
The old WIIFM, the most popular radio station in the world. What's in it for? Me. And if you configure the WIFM for everyone,
right.
then we're all good. Questions again? Just keep...
There we go.
It's over here first. Ali.
You mentioned internet and Yammer. So when you're looking at tools like that and things like LinkedIn groups and things, how do you maintain engagement with your audience there?
So the question is, when you've got tools like Yammer or LinkedIn or other online groups, how do you maintain the engagement after the initial new shiny thing has worn off?
So I think there's two sides to that conversation, internally and externally. I think internally it's about making it part of the day-to-day working life. I mean, like, no one here probably has an issue with engaging with email. Unfortunately. It's just a reality of how we operate. It's actually a terribly inefficient system if you look at the way email works, and Google, God bless them, tried to replace it with Wave, and we all resisted, but actually in reality it's a very poor way of communicating. It's very disjointed. So understanding how you can make that part of people's daily kind of activity is certainly a good starting point to making sure the platform isn't a boom and bust. Making sure it isn't the nagging little crazy thing in the corner, which Yammer can turn into really badly. This thing just pops up every 10 seconds until eventually you just want to kill it. That understanding that people will want to turn stuff off, allowing people to have silence. It's amazing how hard that is. We just introduced into our organisation the idea of email silence. You're allowed to go offline for an hour a day in the middle of the day, and no one's judging you on it. Because there is this,
I
know, God bless. But there is an expectation. There's an expectation in our world that, like, oh my God, they're ignoring me. That's ridiculous.
When I get autoresponders back that says I'm out of the office for the afternoon, if you really need me, call me on the mobile. I was like, no, just don't reply. Stop training people that you are. I'm going
to get. I think it's KPMG. I wouldn't want to quote me on that, but I think it's KPMG that does this thing where between the hours of 10 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you can only have external meetings. So you can't have internal organisation meetings in that period of time. They make their money out of talking to customers, obviously. So why would you be having masses of? But I actually think that's really powerful. I mean, it's not collaboration. It's just someone doing some common sense, right? But actually, I like that idea. And technology allows you to maybe do a bit of that, turn stuff off or not. And then I think when you then take that into the external, or how do you stop understanding that externally your customer base is transitory. So don't have an expectation of a constant conversation with them, but do use those conversations to generate more. Social media is a good example. There's a fixation on social media at the moment about building up a cohort, a number of likes, people on your page. It's not really the power of social media. I mean, it does that very, very well, but the understanding that you want stuff to be shared and get extra reach from those communications is far more powerful than the little group of people you've got there. This is singing to the choir, right? You need the choir to go and evangelize for you. And that's when social media becomes really, really powerful. And there are systems and processes to make sure you can now use social media to identify a cohort for you doing advertising, good old digital banner ads and stuff. You can use your social media to define them, look at the engagement, and then go and buy them in mass network. So those things become really important to understand that maybe one is a locked group of people that you need to organise, someone else will be a transitory group of people that you need to inspire to use whatever this is. I think the simplest one is the on-page chat. That if you look at what Telstra did, Telstra is a great example of an organisation that had its issues. Maybe its online wasn't as good as it maybe could be, of being kind. Who then stepped into this idea of doing Telstra 24 with the, I don't know if anybody's used Telstra, the chat.
Yep.
It's
awesome.
And it's not limited. Usually the online chat, I'll phone you, or they literally, if you can do it on the telephone or you can do it in person, you can do it on that chat system. And I have to say, I've actually done one in a situation where I was phoning the phone and I thought, well, I'll give this a go. And I actually had this all finished and done, and the guy at the other end of it finished, and I thought, they haven't answered this phone. Like, I've actually, they've actually changed the shift. So I think understanding that, if you can be a service, if you can make things smoother, then people will use it, and you don't have to. There's nothing worse than an organisation that mandates the use of something because it's failing.
I'd also argue that it's about continuing to show the value. So
continuing
to put in the the good updates or the good stories. Any system is going to get boring and old after a while. For the first time, it's that sense of, oh, this is really interesting, this is really cool, have you seen everything that's going on? And then after a while, it's just like, ping, ping, it's another banal conversation.
I've seen Yammer's done it, and I've also seen it done with paper, where people have set up allowed parts of the business to set up private groups, so the social committee can have theirs, and so rather than just setting up this business structure and say this is a business tool, allow there to be a group of people that play pool at the weekend using it, and fine, isolate it. You don't need to know what's going on; it doesn't matter. But it becomes then more intuitive to use it.
Thank you for kicking off the questions. Juliet has the next one.
I do. My question's around technology moves so fast, but a lot of organisations don't. So what would be what would be some of your tips for helping organisations be more nimble in the digital space?
That's a good question. Don't try and eat the whole elephant. I think is probably part of it. We're doing a lot of conversations at the moment about digital platforming, about how you get these big data pools and how you do recommunication and stuff. And some of these things are 2-year deployments at like $6 or $7 million deployments. And no one wants to buy that off. No one even wants to start having that conversation. Where reality of it is, there are parts of that you can test and learn. You could stick in Yammer and see if people want to do online chat. You can stick in Dropbox Paper and see if there's a desire to do prototyping and collaboration online at the same time. If finance and want to use Excel or throw it up in Google Document, play with the component parts before you try and build the whole story. I think is also a good part of the story. It's really easy to get minimum viable product up and running. I mean, literally, you could do it this afternoon. You could go back and put Slack in or Trello, or this stuff costs virtually nothing. It's easy to do. It's easy to test, but understand that's a roadmap to what you actually want it to do. But I think that seems to be the way to kind of get into this, is literally get into it. Put it together, a little committee, a group of you that owns this damn thing as well. I think one of the most exciting things I think I've ever seen is the fact we now have a librarian in our organisation. What a strange job title, but we actually have, and we have effectively a collaboration system in the middle called 10,000 feet, which is actually very good. That's another one. But it was filling up very well with workflow, but it was filling up very badly with work examples, which are supposed to sit alongside the workflow. So we just employed a librarian whose job it is basically to go out to the group. If you put up a work and you say this work is closed, you'll get an email from her within usually about half an hour going, great, can you let me have the PDFs? And you go, yep, there it is on the server. And she does the kind of grunt work in some respects of making it, put it in place. Now that's mostly because I've got a load of creatives who want to be at the pub, not doing that. But
and creatives are messy.
Yeah, and they're messy. They would never do it properly.
They'd never follow the file tree.
And it would be their own version, not the client's version on the server, probably.
The version they wish the client.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Not that I'm saying that, but so I think that idea of some kind of ownership in the process is also critical. That's not necessarily control, but making sure, just being there, clearing it up, making sure it's doing what it's supposed to do, and also then being able to report on its successes, because it's really good to tell everyone how it worked, tell those little stories internally of something that worked because you have this, and that helps. That's a better way of encouraging people to do it than mandating it.
Absolutely. I'd also argue don't bite off the elephant, but also change your thinking. It doesn't have to be enterprise-grade software anymore. There are so many free tools, and the pushback I often get is, oh, but it's free, so therefore we can't use it. What? Oh, but we don't know how secure it is and all that kind of jazz. Unless you're talking seriously world defence secrets, doesn't matter. And just try it with that small group. And
if that's a problem,
I go rogue.
Yeah, and there are systems. If it's a problem, go and buy yourself a Microsoft box and spin up SharePoint if you really have to. At least you can own the data internally. Understand that's going to come with its trials.
That's
Software
right.
as a service, which is what we're talking about, cloud or whatever you want to call it. Rarely do I find a real problem with it. If you're government, obviously bear in mind you probably want to find yourself an Australian one so the data doesn't end up in America. Yeah. But apart from that, it's pretty solid. Exactly.
I've got time for one more question. Oh, okay, 2 it is.
Oh, fight.
1 and then 2.
Punch up in the car park.
One of the things that I think most of us in the room experience is the rapidly changing technology and the expectations of people on the other end of technology to provide instantaneous responses. Or, I'm sure everybody in the room's been in a situation where you've received an email and then you get an email an hour later saying you haven't responded to my email that you sent an hour ago. Now, I guess there's probably a few reasons for that, but and you can put measures in place to say that, you know, after 5 o'clock we're not going to be responding to emails and that type of thing. But then you've got your clients that have a different sort of expectation. Have you had experience with other industries where this, you know, this whole communication instance, you know, expectation of instant response, people sending you emails at 8 o'clock at night and wondering why you haven't responded till 9 o'clock the next morning, that type of thing? Have you had experiences where you've seen the way that's been managed? I don't think we can actually stop it, but tips on how you can actually manage that within the industry so that at the end of the day you can have some downtime and you can sort of, I guess, switch off from work rather than have, you know, be constantly looking at your phone at 8 o'clock at night and or checking emails before you go to bed and that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think airlines are probably suffer from this terribly. You know, the airlines ultimately want to shut their doors, but they have people travel late at night. They have people internationally that they have to deal with. I think there's a couple of things that come to mind that do it. Bots, automatic processes that sit somewhere in the logic that says, well, as that message comes in, and you see it a lot for tech support and all that sort of stuff now, where it will recognise the nature of the question that's coming in, especially if it's coming in through a web form, and it will try and solve the problem before it allows you to generate the email. So it'll kind of go, it looks like you're trying to say this, we've seen this problem before, or we've had this type of inquiry before. Does this answer the problem for you? Is this useful? Invariably, it's not, if we're honest, because they don't do a very good job of writing them. But you know, if you've got a narrower field of conversation, they can work really, really well. And then I think the second part of that is a collaborative response to that process. So an awful lot of the time, that will go to a larger group of people to deal with it, and it's first come, first serve on the answering process. So something like Answer Hub does a good job of that, where I can have a web form where people can pose a question, and it will spin it out to, it knows who's doing what sort of hours, who's got mobiles that can deal with it, and it will spin that question out to maybe 10, 20, 30, 40 people. And the first one to kind of pick it up and start answering, it literally turns it off on all the other phones. So again, the person at the other end doesn't get like 12 responses, because that would be weird. But it also will have there's a hierarchy. So I don't know, maybe you have a very strong knowledge of the subject and I have a fairly loose knowledge. If I start typing and you start typing, I'm going to get very polite. Someone better than you is having a go. It doesn't quite use it that word, but that's effectively what it's telling me. It pretty much goes, yeah.
Does that happen often?
Yeah, all the time. Mine never asks me anything. The cleaner does a better job than I do. But yeah, so there's that kind of let the system do a bit of it. Reality check is if someone wants a desperate conversation with a human being at the wrong type of hour, that's a human management process. There's no piece of software in the world that's going to make that easier for you. If they want the conversation, they're still going to demand to talk to someone, right? And you can either throw them to a call centre or pick up the phone. I don't know that there's any software on the planet that can make that easier for you. Pre-recorded responses, yes, they're out there. They tend to be horrible. Anybody that's actually used those systems will know the insurance companies love them. You know, you phone and put in this is my claim, and you'll get the kind of pre-recorded garbage at the other end. They just annoy people. We're still people. If I want to talk to a human being, then there's no way of getting in between that.
I've seen a couple of good platforms where I've gone to book accommodation at venues, and I've got an instant response back saying, thank you very much, we've got you tentatively booked for these dates. We'll call you in the morning to confirm the details. And when they call, nothing tentatively has been done, because what they've actually said is, actually, sorry, we don't have those dates available. Can I, so it is that auto response. But in that moment, I feel like I'm on my way. I've got it sorted. So it requires a little bit of customer service. But I agree with Rob, this human notion that we have that because I want something, I should get a response now. The best way to deal with that is just be really strong on your boundaries. I don't reply to emails after 5 o'clock anymore. I don't reply to work-based texts after 6. Not because I don't care, but because I was at the office all day. I don't need to do this. You know, and people then learn, okay, I'm not going to get a response from Kat. It's after 6. I mean, guess what? She'll reply to me in the morning because she always does. Well, actually, not always, but that's okay.
Very rarely.
That's just you.
This is me.
Final question was up the back.
Thank you. My question, Rob, you mentioned quite a few tools in the last hour. I think I counted about 12, and we were Googling about 4 of them up the back to find out what they were. It seems like there's going to be a lot more tools available to organisations. My question is, in an organisation, how can you collaborate with your own team when you go to implement some of those tools? Because there seems to be quite a few, and I'm interested on how you bring the rest of the team along with that efficiency journey with you.
Yeah, I think it's always a problem. I mean, when you roll out anything to a group of people, you're going to have the detractors and the lovers, right? That's just the reality of doing anything for a group of people. I think if you can take a process that says we've identified a pain point for you as a collective, and this will solve that pain point, even if you're rolling in 3 or 4 other things in behind it, then I think that works really, really well. Most people just want things to be easier. We talk about things being frictionless. You know, at the end of the day, most things we ask people to do are just a bit sort of clunky and are probably a tiny bit too hard. We have a problem in our organisation, if you like, timesheets. You know, we expect all our people to log their time quarter of an hour by quarter of an hour, and yet we also expect them to be extremely efficient and be on the road. It makes little or no sense to have that expectation on people. And our industry's tried everything, you know, from recording the screen activity and file names that are open, all that sort of stuff. And actually, about 3 months ago, we launched a mobile app with a start-stop button on it, like completely moron-proof. Like, that's been the best thing we've. And
But it's fun. I get to press a button.
It probably cost us about like $5.50 to roll out, and we just tied it back into a web page that's already on the system. But the benefit to the individual was that you stop nagging me. You're not going to keep on about this thing. And I can, you know, I've seen people leave the office and they just tap it on the way out the door because they know they're going to that client. When they get back, they tap the button. That was it. That was that client. It's just things like that. How can you make their life easier? Yeah. Because then they'll come on the journey with you. And you can roll in more complication. Often you'll find you make their life easier on something, but actually in reality you are adding more levels of complexity. And then I think the next part of that is to make sure that everyone you don't put undue burden. One of the things I think that happens time and time again is people talk about forms and filling in data. And you know, the reason why CRM fails often is because people are either not franchised to put the data in, or they haven't got time. You know, it's just real simple. I'm going to share.
Or it's too complicated.
Salesforce is a classic example. You know, tell me about every phone call, every conversation, every process you've ever had with every person. We're humans. Like I've had that phone call. I'll phone you back tomorrow. I know I'm going to phone you back tomorrow. Do I have to then go and log that call? It takes longer to log the call than it does to make it. It becomes a complete nonsense, and everyone will shy away from it. And that's what happens. You know, the car dealership version, that's exactly what's happening. But give them an opportunity to share some revenue, and all of a sudden, guess what? They're filling it in really beautifully because they can see a tangible benefit for them. And I think that gets lost somewhere in the software conversation. And while there are, and we have talked about a lot of platforms, pick one. Find the one that does the biggest bit of the problem you need to solve. And they've usually got ways of tying them all together anyway. So I would pick one and just try that and see what the desire is in the organisation. But start with those pain points and you'll be a hero, not a hated.
Totes. I'm done. And
Yeah, me too. Really.
yeah, it's that afternoon. So am I.
It's that point in the afternoon, isn't it, really?
Thanks, Rob, and thank you everyone for your questions.
Hey, guys.